Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about the role of artificial intelligence in security. In this case, actual physical security, as in the security of a building or a data center. Along the way, we'll talk about an emerging AI technology called computer vision intelligence. Pretty interesting stuff. To discuss that, I'm joined by a major industry thought leader, Stephanie McReynolds, who is head of marketing at Ambient.ai. Stephanie, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on the program. It's very exciting to share this technology with you.
Great. And you and I have known each other for a while. You've had an interesting career. You were with Elation. You've been with a number of data analytics companies. I think you've seen the Silicon Valley / data analytics scene really firsthand. I'm not even sure what my question is, but I think you've had a pretty interesting career.
I have had an amazing career. I actually started my career in Silicon Valley, focused on data and analytics. The very first company I worked with was a recommendation engine in the era of e-commerce, and we were commercializing that recommendation engine to support many e-commerce websites. And what I think is interesting about the evolution of AI is, the early days of machine learning and recommendation engines, we were really powering advertising and e-commerce. Important use cases, but ones that weren't particularly changing the world, right?
Right.
Today, when we look at how AI has evolved through autonomous vehicles and robots and the impact we have an opportunity to have in physical security, we're really changing the physical world with AI and computer vision. And so to see this industry change so much over what's not an extremely short career, but not a ton of time has been super exciting. And I'm looking forward to the future too.
That is really cool, and definitely it's a very hot area. I think that the use of AI to boost security is definitely a key emerging technology these days. Seems like every application, every platform is doing that. Can you talk about why this has become so important to use AI to help out security? It's almost like we humans can't keep up anymore, and we need some assistance. What's going on with that?
That's exactly right, James. As humans, we can't keep up anymore. And there have been lots of innovations in cybersecurity. So that's where most people focus in the market, because cybersecurity has really taken off over the last 10 years. But what's interesting is that our physical security has become really the last mile for cybersecurity. It's the last problem to solve. Once you make it hard to hack into a network, where hackers go to is, can we steal a laptop? Can we get into a building to actually get access to that intellectual property? And so physical security has to be addressed at some point to have good cybersecurity. And that's what a lot of our customers have identified. That being said, physical security is an area that really hasn't seen a lot of innovation in the last 25 years. And so what's exciting today is the ability to take some of the same AI techniques that are used in cybersecurity, but apply those to transforming the physical security landscape. And there's a real opportunity with AI to shift physical security from a reactive state into a proactive state. So why do I say that physical security today is reactive, right? Remember that timeline I set out, 25, in the last 25 years, not much has changed. Well, what happened 25 years ago is we introduced small, low-cost IP cameras into our physical buildings and campuses. And those cameras began to collect real-time video streams of what was happening in those locations. Fantastic, right? It was an early digitization, really, of physical security. The challenge was that we as humans couldn't process those cameras. There are actually two challenges. One was this camera chaos, where you have hundreds and thousands of streams coming in with these cameras that no human can possibly watch in real time, right? So you're creating this flood of data that humans, if you think about just when you watch a video, right, after the first couple of minutes, we might tune out as humans.
Not this video, of course, but other videos.
Not this video, of course, but if you're watching television at home, right, are you really paying attention, or you kind of tune out after the first couple minutes? And so humans just don't have the capacity to take in all of that information that's being shared with them and find security incidents. And this leads us to the second challenge, which is, how do you identify security incidents at scale? So you created all of this volume of data. Mostly what we're doing in physical security environments is that those video streams are being used to gather evidence. So after the fact, we run a forensic investigation, which means that we pull all of that video information down. We spend hours searching through that video information to look for a perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
And when we find the perpetrator, then we use the video as evidence to prosecute that individual.
Right.
Well, that seems a little odd because we have this information available to us in real time. Those video streams are being collected in real time. And so we have this broad digital infrastructure of cameras that could be used for proactive processing and proactive human response, but we're not able to do that today. There are actually over 1 billion video surveillance cameras in the world today.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that existing physical infrastructure.
Wow.
Now, I said there were 2 problems. The first was this camera chaos. The second is, how do you identify those security incidents? And this is where computer vision intelligence has really made a breakthrough in the industry. We've had systems, video analytics systems for some time that were able to do really simple tasks, motion detection, identifying objects, right? With deep learning algorithm, you can say, this is a human, this is a car, this is an animal. But those video analytics weren't sufficient to produce or understand any context of that scene. So let me give you an example. I can identify an object that's a person, and I can identify an object that is a knife. And I can see on the video screen that there's a person walking with a knife. If I'm going to make a security decision, I really need to know whether that person is walking in a kitchen, which is not threatening, or that person is walking with a knife in a conference room, which is a concern and something I want to dispatch a patrol officer to in order to bring down the threat level of that scene. And so that's a piece of context that's really important. It's something that computers haven't been able to identify until quite recently. And so with video analytics, we got a whole bunch of false alarms being triggered in our environments. And now with computer vision intelligence, the ability to identify context and interaction between objects, we're able to diminish those false alarms by over 90% and start to automate the prioritization and the human response that we need for those security incidents. So I'm very bullish on the future of physical security and how we can start to shift and transform the industry with this new technology.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's definitely needed. I mean, as we say, it's hard for humans to keep up with it all. And I hear you about the camera chaos. Let's talk about Ambient itself. I mean, I know that it uses computer vision, which is a big part of it, and artificial intelligence. It assesses 3 risk factors. How exactly does the Ambient solution work? I mean, what's the advantage?
Yeah, so Ambient.ai is a computer vision intelligence company. So we are focused on taking computer vision technology and applying it to the reduction of security threats in our organizations. We take a very unique technology approach to doing this. There have been years of research in computer vision that have enabled us to capture this context and to be able to look at movement and interactions of objects. Our unique ability to bring that research to the table and commercialize it has been focused on the development of a graph structure, a graph architecture, for looking at and comparing threat signatures, which are known, incidents that are known to be threatening, to behaviors that we see within the organization on a video stream. So think about Ambient as an intelligent brain in your organization. The eyes of that intelligent brain are really the video streams that we're collecting from the cameras. The ears of that brain are maybe physical access control readers, where individuals are badging in and out of a room, and we can integrate that sensor information into the camera feed processing that we're doing. And other sensors in the environment become useful as well. And so we're creating this brain of the organization that's using a graph structure to look at 3 things. What's the context of the scene? What type of room this is? Is it a kitchen? Is it a conference room? What time of day it is? Is this during business hours or after hours? And so that context is important. We're also capturing what are the objects that are available in this scene. And then I think most exciting about this is we're actually looking at the interaction between objects. So what is the movement? Is someone picking up a laptop or a box. So if you think about a more mundane example than my prior one, maybe we're looking at a scene where it's a secure room within a corporate building and it's after hours. Those are two types of scene context.
Right.
Someone in that room. So we've identified a person as an object. That person is holding a laptop, a second object. And the behavior, the interaction between those two objects is they're leaving a secure room with that laptop.
Mm-hmm.
That's a threat to the business.
Hmm.
Ambient.ai identifies that with the Ambient.ai context graph. We trigger an alert then that goes into the security operations center so that a human can prioritize that incident. Or we also have the ability, because we have this accuracy of identifying threat signatures, we have the ability to automate the response to that alert. And so we can immediately dispatch a patrol officer or even law enforcement to that scene if that's what's necessary. And so this significantly changes how the Security Operations Center can monitor a campus, particularly in a situation where not a lot of people may be on that campus during COVID or it's after hours, and improve security outcomes in real time rather than waiting for after the fact evidence.
Yeah, I can definitely see the advantage there. It turns a whole bank of cameras into an intelligence system as opposed to merely an information gathering, sort of a passive gathering system. I'm sure that some people will be concerned, not about Ambient in particular, but the technology and that, it's really watching us at every moment. It's sort of a big brother thing. So I say even in the product brochure for Ambient, it says it achieves its goals while, quote, preserving individual privacy. I mean, what's your take on the issue here? Is privacy at stake when using AI in this manner?
So one of the challenges in the physical security industry is that a lot of the advancements in physical security have focused on increasing the safety of individuals while diminishing, the need for or the impact of privacy. And as a company, even from our founding day 5 years ago, we decided that we were going to preserve privacy and find out how we could balance security and safety with privacy. One of the greatest examples of how personal privacy is being threatened by physical security systems is facial recognition. And we've taken a very hard stance against facial recognition. We do not do facial recognition. That's not a part of our product. And we've made a public commitment that it will not be a part of our product going forward.
Does that mean it's one individual face is recognized by facial recognition?
Well, so in facial recognition, you collect a database of individuals' faces and identities, and you use that database to identify potential perpetrators in a scenario. What we believe and what we're proving out with our technology and with our customers is that you don't need to know someone's identity to prevent security incidents. You don't need to actually collect any personally identifiable information. You don't need to understand their gender or their race. You can identify, and this is kind of logical if you think about it as a human, right? If someone is threatening me, if they look like they're going to throw a punch, I can tell by the movement of their body that that's what they're intending to do. I don't need to understand their gender or their race or their identity or their background to know that that situation is threatening. And so how Ambient.ai works is exactly the same. We look for the movement of individuals to identifying threatening behaviors. Is someone climbing over a perimeter wall of the building? Is someone entering a room they shouldn't be entering? Technically, how we preserve privacy is we ensure that the processing of our algorithms is actually done on metadata and not on that raw video footage. So all personally identifiable information is stripped out of the data that we're feeding into the computer vision algorithms that Ambient uses to identify if there's a threat scenario or not in a particular incident. And so this preserves individual privacy, but also allows us to maximize the utility of AI to identify emerging threats or potential threats in an environment.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's sort of the best of both worlds in a sense. You can really see what's going on with the cameras in real time, but you're not actually identifying it's this person, this gender, this race. So I'm sure there are other applications of this out there that are not quite as thoughtful and or utopian as this. I'm sure but it's nice that Ambient is not identifying those characteristics.
And I think this is something that actually. Oh, sorry, James.
No, I'd love to get your take on that because I'm sure that we hear about China, for example. It's like it's got cameras in every corner. It's like people really being watched? I mean, I'm sure it's a similar technology, but not as high-minded as the one you're talking about.
So what's really important to deliver this type of a solution is that the culture of the company, the culture of your development team, really the whole company, but particularly the development team, needs to be thinking about privacy by design from the very beginning of architecting the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the things that impressed me about Ambient.ai and their approach, is this is a fundamental part of the culture. They follow Ann Kevorkian's principles of privacy by design. It's part of every conversation before we develop a new feature. It's part of not only, the feature that I shared, this ability to process metadata is one of the features in our product that instantiates that. But another example would be how we avoid bias in training our models. We train our models based on metadata as well. So we avoid sending PII information to those models, but we also structure the training of the models on a systems basis. So we use systems blocks to restrain the decision-making that any single model is asked to do. So there isn't an Uber model or one global model that takes over the processing of the system. And, that structure of training tends to reduce, bias situations in AI development. And we know that there's lots of examples where AI has been biased, right? Kathy O'Neill wrote a wonderful book, Weapons of Math Destruction, which is very accessible to the common person. So we know this is an issue in AI. But it is really very easy to program machines to avoid bias, probably easier to program machines to avoid bias than it is to reprogram humans who are already biased. And so these types of privacy by design approaches help us to maintain that type of focus and structure.
Interesting. All right. So I'd love to get your sense of sort of the zillion-dollar question. I mean, what is the future of AI, computer vision, and security? Obviously, it's a very hot area. There's a lot going on, a lot of dollars being poured into it. What do you predict, say, a few years out, 2 to 4 years out? I mean, any milestones you would say are coming?
Yeah, as we know from the top of our talk here, I'm very bullish on the future for computer vision and just how computer vision is transforming our physical spaces. Much more exciting technology than ad recommendation engines, where I started my career.
Right.
Specific to physical security, I also think since there's been this dearth of innovation, we really have an opportunity to change how we approach physical security. The technology is a trigger for changing our culture around reactive security and turning it into proactive security. And this has a large dollar figure on it. If you look at the physical security industry, it's a $93 billion industry as of 2020. Yeah. And it is only growing, going forward. So enterprises are investing millions of dollars to implement these security cameras that fall into camera chaos where no one is watching, right? Mm-hmm. If we can begin to use those cameras to automate the prioritization of human intervention appropriately, we really have a way to start working to transform the security of our buildings. And a good example of this is what we're seeing already in our customers. We've been working with customers for about 5 years now, pretty seriously in production for 2 years. Companies like VMware, Adobe, Black Lab, they're really changing their approach to physical security using ambient AI and computer vision in their environment. VMware is a very good example. They were introduced to ambient as an extension of their cybersecurity program, really. So they had some success with AI and cybersecurity. They were beginning to think about how they could define a future that they call physical security 2.0. How could they make their environments even more secure? And so they were using ambient for threat detection for a while in their environment, perimeter breaches, stolen laptops, those types of use cases. And at the beginning of COVID, they had an idea. They realized that tailgating, someone following an individual into the building without badging in, was an issue for contact tracing with COVID.
Okay.
And they didn't really know how many incidents of tailgating they were having, so they asked their security guards to begin to count, and they counted tens of incidents in a week. They then focused Ambient.ai on counting tailgating incidents, and they found that they actually had thousands of incidents
every single week. Every week that's going on?
Absolutely. It's really simple, particularly when maybe in COVID, you haven't seen a coworker for a long time. You just hold the door open for that coworker.
Sure.
Then you're not swiping your badge.
Right.
So you don't know from a systems perspective who's entered that building and who you need to put on the list for contact tracing, right? So that creates a problem. Just having the computer with the scale to identify and count this problem was a significant impact on the business, because once you've identified the problem, you can begin to solve it. And this shift from a reactive response to a proactive response started to settle in at VMware. So what the security team felt enabled to do now was to invest in communications, some educational programs as to what the impact of tailgating actually was on their business. They also use the ambient technology to fire alerts to those security guards to begin to intervene while the behavior was happening. So they would just give an individual warning, hey, I noticed that you were tailgating. We're trying to avoid that behavior for the safety and security of all the individuals of the company. And the security team now began to change the culture of the organization. So they've reduced tailgating incidents by 99%.
Wow.
They've also reduced the number of false alarms with that threat detection deployment they had by over 90, reduced the number of alarms overall actually with their threat detection implementation by over 93%.
Wow.
And they're really changing the culture into this vision of security, physical security 2.0 for their organization. So I think in the next 2 to 4 years, we're going to see more organizations like VMware beginning to think differently about how they implement security, about how they can empower their security operations professionals to really have impact and cultural change in the business. And we're going to see more positive outcomes. I'm optimistic that 2 to 4 years out, we're living, working, and playing in a slightly more secure world because of some of these technologies.
I like the sound of that. I hope that vision comes true. Stephanie, I think you said it. It's a lot of good stuff. I definitely learned a ton. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise today. Thanks.
Thank you. I really enjoyed being on. It was a great discussion, James.